and welcome everyone. My name is Wiwi Darmiasi from the Matsunaga Institute for Peace. Thank you for joining us today on our Careers in Peacebuilding Talk Story series. This event is also co-sponsored by Conflict and Peace Specialists at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Now I would like to hand it over to our professor, Dr. Maya Soetoro, as our moderator today. Maya, please take it away.
Thank you. Terima kasih, Wiwi. Want to thank Wiwi Darmiasi and Jose Barzola, as always, for doing a wonderful job of stewarding this Careers in Peacebuilding series. As Wiwi mentions, my name is Maya Soetoro with the Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. And I'm so happy today to share with you some of the ideas and vision and wonderful character of Shai Tamari. Shai is the founder and president of the Tamari Conflict Management program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's the director of the Conflict Management Initiative and professor of the practice under the Department of Public Policy and the curriculum in Peace, War, and Defense. At Duke University, Shai is an adjunct instructor at Sanford School of Public Policy. He teaches both undergraduate and graduate level skills-based courses in conflict management. At UNC, Shai is also the director of the minor in conflict management. So as you see, Shai wears many hats and works in many spaces in his career in conflict management. Prior to those appointments, he was the associate director of the UNC Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies. That was between 2010 and 2023, and the foreign policy advisor for Congressman James P. Moran at the U.S. House of Representatives. That was from 2008 to 2010, where he focused on issues such as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, human rights in Iran, and parental child abduction to Japan. Born and raised in Jerusalem, Shai earned a BA in journalism from the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane and a master's degree in Near and Middle Eastern Studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London in UK. In 2006, he was awarded a Rotary Peace Fellowship and studied for a second master's in global history along with Arabic and conflict resolution studies at UNC. And while he was a Rotary Peace Fellow, he worked with Cooperative Housing Foundation International in Amman, Jordan. So his experiences are far-reaching and truly international, and we're looking forward to getting to know and learn from him today. Welcome, Shai.
Hello, and thank you so much for that introduction. As you were talking, I'm like, I don't know who this person is. He sounds fantastic.
He is fantastic. So grateful that you are part of our beloved community. Now, I want to perhaps start by asking you to share with us some of your story. How did you get to this point in life and to this work? Was it a circuitous or a straightforward path? And how did you make the decisions to be involved and commit to the work?
There was definitely not a straight line. I was born and raised in Israel, and I left in '97, completely lost, and went to England in search of myself. I was there for 3 years and did not find myself. I then moved to Australia, where my mother was living at the time, and started to find myself. So I did my bachelor's in journalism, and I became very interested in Middle East politics. Ironically, being the first away from the region is when I started becoming interested in it. And so I came back to London and did a master's in Middle Eastern Studies with the goal of eventually maybe working in the field. And that's when I came to the United States right after that master's to do a second master's in global history. And my goal was really to work with anything to do with the Middle East. And so when I got my job at at Capitol Hill, I thought, well, this is it. But then I married someone from North Carolina and was commuting on a weekly basis between DC and Chapel Hill, and that was not sustainable. So I quit my job on Capitol Hill, came back to North Carolina, and was searching for any job to do with the Middle East, and found one with the Middle East Center, which was a full-time administrative job. And while I was doing that, I was also asked to teach on the Middle East. And I started teaching courses on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, on Palestinian politics, on US-Israel relations. And after a while, it just got too emotionally heavy for me. I was teaching current events, which meant I needed to stay up to date about what's going on. And being from the region, it was tough for me. It was tough for me to continue reading the news and teaching about it, and having students finish a semester being completely depressed and like, why should I continue studying this field? And I was feeling kind of the same. And so I was offered an opportunity to teach a graduate course on negotiation and mediation. And the same course that I took as a graduate student. And I thought, now this is way outside my comfort zone. I've never done this before. But then I kind of pushed myself to do it, and so grateful, because I realized that what I was really interested in were interpersonal conflict management, how to interact with other people, and how to reach a place where I can communicate more efficiently. And that's because I was a very bad communicator as a child and as a young adult. And I viewed my course as, let's do all the things that Shai should have done when he was younger. And maybe if you guys do it better, your lives would be a bit happier and more fulfilling. So that's kind of how I got into it. So it was definitely not a straight line. I spent my 20s traveling from place to place, not knowing where I'm going to be. I spent my 30s being pissed off at my 20s for being so lost. And then when I reached my 40s, I was so appreciative of being lost in my 20s, because that's what allowed me to become who I am today. So that's my my short answer to your question.
All right, and I'm assuming that we will learn more about some of those meanderings and discoveries as the conversation goes on. But I do have to ask, since you brought it up, you know, what do you now do? Tell people? How do you help people, especially young people, to understand and not feel entirely despondent at what is happening in Gaza and Israel? You know, how do you speak about and hold space to help young people know how to place themselves too in the current conflict between Israel and Hamas, and to process all that has happened in Gaza and is happening?
So I find myself in this bizarre space. So born and raised in Israel, I have family and friends in Israel. And then I have a large number of Gazan friends who are mostly living outside of Gaza, but still have family in Gaza. And if you look at my WhatsApp text messages, it's basically Israel, Gaza, Israel, Gaza. And I initially felt when after the most recent war started, I felt if only I was more to one side, maybe this would be easier. And now I find myself in a very fortunate space where I have loved ones on both sides. And I view them as friends and family first, and then whatever tribe or group they belong to second. Um, and what I found myself doing over the last few months is mostly just listening. Um, I think the greatest gift that I can give someone is to listen to them. The greatest gift that I can receive is to be listened to. And so I find myself simply either reaching out over text, calling, or emailing just to find out how people are doing, and providing a space for them to share whatever they're going through. I don't find myself in the business to tell people what's going on or what they need to be thinking. I really want to be listened to, and I want to listen to others. And that's basically what it is that I've been doing over the last few months. This has been a very tough period for me. And yet I'm so fortunate to be living in North Carolina and not in the region. So, I used to give a lot of many talks on the Middle East, and a few years ago I stopped doing that because I realized that the two things people want when they hear a talk about the Middle East: give me some hope and give me some solutions. And I felt that I was no longer in a space where I could do that. What I can do is simply listen to people's pain, and that's what I do.
I appreciate the honesty of that response. I have come to sort of feel that it is our job, those of us who are not traumatized in the middle of the conflict, to in fact hold that deep listening space, to preserve a sense of empathy and understanding for all of the stories and all of their dimensions, so that there is no dehumanizing happening, so that when there is such time, and I hope that time arrives, that healing is possible, that we won't all be so broken, that we will be able to feel the depths of the humanity on both sides, or in more than one space. So I appreciate that. It's hard to feel so incapable of fixing things, right? Of making a direct difference right now. But sometimes those stories, that listening, the recognition of humanity allows us to find an antidote to grief, the love that is present in that. So thank you. I want to now ask you about the subject of today's talk: making a difference while making a living. There are many students here who are taking peace studies classes and understand the value of these skills and perspectives, and they're shifting their mindset and learning conflict resolution, conflict management skills. But I think many of them despair, thinking that there's no way that they're going to be able to find a job or to make a living utilizing those skills, and sort of feel pressed to take up other work that they don't perceive as being directly relevant to those skills. And part of the series is designed to actually challenge those notions, right? The Careers in Peacebuilding series allows us to kind of explore all of the various careers in peacebuilding and conflict resolution, and to hopefully find places for students interested in this work to enter the stream. Help us to understand, how have you made a difference while making a living? How does one do both? And what are the challenges and successes of being a conflict management facilitator?
So first of all, I'm still working on this. I don't think I'll ever reach the final point where I can say this is done. But I think I'll start a bit. I'll go a bit backwards. So as I said, for 12 years I was a administrator. And so I had two roles at the same time. I was both an administrator and I was teaching. There were two separate roles that I played. And the administrative role paid the bills. And I was quite content with what I was making. And the teaching was, a bonus in terms of making a living. And for a number of years, I felt I am so unfulfilled in my administrative role. And for me to be fulfilled, it means that I feel that I'm making a difference both in other people's lives and also in my life as well at the same time, a combination of the two. And I had a good deal. I had this administrative role that paid pretty well. I was teaching. I wanted to do more of the teaching. I wanted to do more of the consulting. But when you have a good thing going, you feel like I don't want to risk stepping outside of this box and taking a risk. And then something happened last year. I got fired. I got fired from my administrative role. There was new leadership, and I went from feeling that, oh, I got this. I got life. I know how it works. And then the following day, I have zero financial security. And at the time, I was just basically teaching 1 or 2 courses, and I had this full-time position, and now I no longer had this full-time position. And for a number of years, I wanted to create this consultancy, but I kept pushing it because I was too busy. It wasn't a priority. I didn't have time. And now I had time. So I developed this consultancy that is still not even a year old. And I now have 2 roles. I am still teaching at both University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and at Duke, and I'm doing this consultancy as well, which I have a number of contracts that I'm slowly building. And so I'm trying to find this financial security, but what I can say is that 95% of what it is that I do now fulfills me. I feel that every email that I send now, any project that I'm currently working on, I feel makes a difference in somebody else's life and in my own as well. But to go back to your question, okay, we have all these students who are trying to figure out how to do this. And I don't have a direct answer. I can talk about the challenges that I had. So I don't have a terminal degree. So I don't have a PhD, a JD, an MBA. And so within the academic field, that is a challenge if you don't have that. And there's only so much that I can do within the academic world. And so I constantly have to ensure that I stay relevant and am seen as relevant in both campuses. And so that is a constant job that I have to do. And in the United States, especially, I know in North Carolina, I'm assuming in other places as well, many people who work and make a living in mediation or negotiation or any ADR have a JD. And I don't have a JD. And I went into becoming certified as a mediator about 10 years ago, or 14 years ago, thinking, once I have that certification, I can start making money and I'll be rolling in it. And boy, was I wrong. And it was a really good reality check to realize that I don't fit in a neat box, and that I'm going to have to create something that works for me. So shortly after I got fired, I started applying for all these jobs that I thought, oh, these look great. The jobs that I really wanted never got a call back. The jobs I really did not want got a call back. And realized that if I took the jobs that were not meeting my fulfillment, I would be really unhappy. I'll be back to square one where I was before. And so that's where starting this consultancy came in. And now I'm also teaching more. And so it's constantly making people aware that I exist, that my business exists. And it is something that's new to me. I'm not used to having to, quote unquote, sell myself. And so I think at the end of the day, there isn't just one way of getting to do this work. What I tell my students is just because you get an MA in conflict resolution does not mean you're going to have a job after that. And so just be aware of how much money you're planning on spending on this degree, and how much, and the chances of actually making a living from that afterwards. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not sure if I answered the question appropriately, but I think that's where I'm at the moment.
Fair. Again, thanks for your sort of pragmatic response and for your insights gleaned from your experiences. I think it's valuable to help young people think about telling their story, the story of their work, the story of their leadership, as well as story of selling yourself, if you know, as you call it, but to think about their leadership identity as a salient feature of what the world needs, and you know, remaining curious and flexible and diversifying their skill sets, and also, you know, planning, doing that backwards mapping. Where do they want to be, and you know, what do they know about how to get there effectively without sacrificing their well-being. There's also the issue of, you know, their mental health and resilience, you know, because the work can be tough work. And so that's something, you know, that caring for self is something that you speak to. And I appreciate it. I know they do as well. All right, so considering your varied experiences in facilitating and teaching, can you share with us, you know, sort of how do you differentiate your conflict management approaches in individual, organizational, educational, community settings? You work in a lot of different spaces, which keeps you agile and I'm sure interested and keeps you learning. But how do you kind of look at each space in terms of how to approach conflict management?
So I think my answer to this question is that there isn't that much of a difference for me. I deal with people, and no matter where they come from, no matter what their experience is, whether you are a mid-career international student from Zimbabwe or a 20-year-old white kid from North Carolina, or a 70-year-old person who has been incarcerated for 50 years, we all, I believe that, and my experience has been that we need similar things. We need to be respected. We need to be acknowledged. We need to be listened to. And I think most importantly, we need to be loved. And that is the basis that I start any course, any workshop, any engagement with people. And I think the environments might change in terms of how people might express themselves, but those needs seem to me to be universal. And what I try to do is to create a space for people to explore themselves and to explore others in that group, whether it's on college campus, in prison, or a leadership workshop.
Well, let's talk more about some of those spaces and experiences. Tell us, for instance, what opportunities and challenges you encountered while teaching and facilitating in prison settings. And tell us about some of your learnings there and how we might do some of that good work as part of our either decarceration or healing.
So for me, facilitating or sitting in circle or teaching in prison has to be one of the most fulfilling experiences that I have had and continue to have. And I am, if there's one thing you take away from this talk today, is if you're able to volunteer or even be paid for in any way to do work in a prison, it is, I think most people here will see how amazingly fulfilling it is, both on a personal level for yourself and for the people you're working with. So I have engaged with 3 different prisons in North Carolina. The first one was Central Prison, where I engaged with men on death row, and I did that for a year. I've done women's prison, which was a medium minimum security, and then I did another men's prison minimum this past fall. The people who come to those classes or to those spaces all come because they have chosen to come. They're not required to come. They might be, pushed to come for the first session, but it's really up to them if they want to stay or not. The best part, not the best part, one of the most amazing parts about sitting in a circle with people in prison is there's no electronics. There's no distractions. For those 2 hours, everybody there is present. Everybody's there is there because they want to get something out of that session. And some people are more guarded than others. Some groups might take longer to open up. My experience with the women's prison was the students there were willing to be vulnerable much quicker than perhaps the men on death row. And yet, at the end of the 2 months program, it felt as if though everybody reached a space in which they were willing to be vulnerable with one another and with me, and to open up and to delve into their own pain. And I should mention that when I facilitate a circle, I'm a participant as well. I have to model what it is that I am asking other people to do. And so whatever prompt I have, whatever question I have, I'm the first one to answer it. And that allows the rest of the people to decide if they want to open up or not. A challenge when working in these environments can be, I've worked with some amazing staff in prisons and some that were less amazing. Some staff that view the people incarcerated as equally human and some who did not. And so you're working within a system, an environment that is so different than any other environment outside of prison, and realizing that there is a very different power dynamic in that environment than elsewhere. At the University of North Carolina, there is a correctional education program, and they have an agreement with 6 prisons where the people in prison get credit for courses taught by faculty. And so faculty and graduate students at our university who choose to teach in prison can go through that program, which is what I did last semester. And it was my first time being in a prison and teaching where the students were actually getting college credit. And that was, again, such an amazing and fulfilling experience because I also teach their conflict management. And we delve, and pardon my language, we delve deep into our own shit, basically. And the pain that we have caused others, the pain that was caused to us, and we connect on a very human level with one another. And at the end of those 2 months, there was a connection that was made there in that group that they don't see on the yard when they're outside the classroom. So I'll leave it at that, although I'm happy to answer more questions about prison.
Yes, you've started asking, but I am curious about the specifics of what you do. You know, what does it look like to have a communication circle like that, and you know, how do you establish that high quality listening or encourage vulnerability? If you can get to some
Sure.
of the specifics, I'm very interested.
Yeah. First session, and by the way, so we all physically sit in a circle. There's nothing in between us and each other, basically. And we use what's called a talking piece. So this can be any item of significance that someone might bring. For an example, I'm a huge Elvis fan. I have a collection of 87 Elvis cassettes that I collected between the late 80s and the late 90s. And so I brought an Elvis, and I know where each cassette was bought and who gave it to me, if somebody gave it to me. And there's a story behind it. So in this past class in prison, I brought an Elvis cassette that my grandfather gave me when I was 14. And my grandfather was someone who did not express love with words, he expressed love with actions. And so he would take me to these music stores and just buy me cassettes or CDs. And so I brought this cassette, and that was our talking piece for that first session. And so when you're holding the talking piece, it's an invitation to listen. When you're not holding it, it's an invitation to, when you're holding it, it's an invitation to speak. When you're not holding it, it's an invitation to listen. You can always pass if you want. And what that creates is a situation in which no one is talking over each other. People who often would be quieter in a group setting would actually have an opportunity to speak and not have to fight for attention. Those who might speak more often are now, quote unquote, forced to be quiet and listen. And so we create some ground rules. You speak for yourself using I statements. When I speak for myself and using I statements, I'm taking responsibility for my words and my actions and my beliefs. What is said in the circle stays in the circle. You can share lessons, but you don't share stories. You speak your truth. Give time and take time. So ensure that you are expressing yourself, but be aware that other people in the group, they also need to speak. And so one of the first questions that I ask, and I start with something it's fairly simple, is what brings you joy? And that's an open-ended question. And here's the thing, there are no wrong answers, just your answer. And so for me, what brings me joy is my 10-month-old puppy, who we recently got, and I'm madly in love with this puppy. And so I talk about this puppy, and other people would share what goes on, what brings them joy. And then to continue with creating guidelines, I have the students write on a piece of paper what is one thing that they want to give to this group, and what is one thing they want to receive from the group. And then, we go around and we share what those things are. So we're building values, we're building a community based on an understanding of one another. And so then we continue. For instance, I have them close their eyes and I have them think. I ask them a question, because when you close your eyes and you are thinking of an answer, you're really allowing yourself to feel the answer rather than to think about it. And so a question that I really like asking is, close your eyes and let the answer bubble up. And the question is, who in your life do you look up to? And what makes them special to you? And so each person will go around and share who that person is. And so again, you're building a connection between people. The following session, I might have them bring an item that has significance for them, and they get to show it, share it, and talk about it. One of my favorite things is to bring, and I do this both in prison and outside of prison, is a bag of toys. And by the way, if you, as an adult, going to a toy store and buying toys, highly recommend it. It is just the most joyful thing to do, just to buy things that, as a kid you would have loved. And so I spread the toys in the middle of the circle, and I say, okay, look at the toys, and select a toy that represents how you deal with conflict. And so, the toys can be anything from a teddy bear to a tank to a fake mustache to sunglasses. And people come up with the most, amazing insights into how they deal with conflict. And we go around the circle and we share that. And then I say, okay, how was conflict handled at home growing up? And how has that impacted the way you handle conflict today based on the item you just chose? And so now we're getting to something much deeper. Now we're going into, okay, so because when I get angry easily, for instance, and that comes from the way my parents always fought at home. And so now we're starting to delve deep into who we are as people. And not sure why I have, that was weird. And so now we're starting to understand ourselves better as humans. A major component of my courses is focusing on the issues of apology and forgiveness, our relationship with how apology has showed up in our life and how we react to people apologizing to us, and how has forgiveness or the lack of forgiveness has impacted our lives. And so we go into that as well. And the final assignment I had for my students, both in prison and outside of prison, is to write a letter of apology. And you can select one of three letters. You can select a letter of apology to someone that you feel you should have apologized to but haven't yet. You can write an apology to yourself, or you can write a letter of apology from someone you wish to receive an apology from, and the letter is from them to you. And we did that in prison, and each student chose a different person or different type of letter of apology, and you read it out loud, and people get to ask questions about the letter, and then also to share what resonated for them when they heard the letter being read out loud. So all that creates a community. All that creates a bond between people on an emotional level. And what I tell my students, both on college and in prison, is most classes teach you how to think and what to think. My classes are a space for you to learn how to feel. And that's basically what I aim for. So that's my long-winded answer to your question.
No, I appreciate all of that so much. I feel that so many of the things that you are facilitating are really strength-based approaches to help them, embrace joy and to think about people whom they admire or care about, to heal hurts and feel bonds. I love that the imagined apologies. I know I've done that process before, even though it is simply imagined by virtue of articulating and sharing and having others respond. It feels very real and quite satisfying. And I like so many of those layered approaches, and the toys. That's a new one, new way to explore our conflict styles. So I see that all of those various techniques can, in the aggregate, help them to take control of their healing journey and to learn and share their learnings. I guess I want to, at this point, ask those of you who are here, if you have any questions, by all means, put them in the chat. Also, thank you to those who have shared your place. You can see, scrolling through, that we have folks from all over Hawaii, but also on the continent, and international folks. And I only have perhaps two more questions for you before, or one before I get to the audience questions. And I guess one of them is, you mentioned that you kind of see universal application in strategy and conflict management, regardless of station or age or space. How do you deal with nuanced cultural and contextual sensitivities? In other words, I think, for instance, here in Hawaii, when we do ho'oponopono, really, it needs to be undertaken by someone who has been trained, who has been given that kuleana, that responsibility, who and yet ho'oponopono is very often culturally appropriated in yoga classes, right? But so there's how do you find that balance between particular, nuanced, and universal, and how do you navigate cultural variations in conflict management and the need for that?
So I'm going to give a very specific example.
Okay.
And the culture difference here that I'm going to talk about relates to both age, probably race, and environment. And so in this last class that I taught in prison, there was someone there who was incarcerated for 50 years. And for the record, I'm about to turn 48. So this person has been in prison for longer than I've been alive. And we were sitting in circle for 15 sessions. And I was trying to, I think I wasn't trying, I was wanting him to open up. I was wanting him to express themselves like all my other students have done in the past and all the other students in that specific class. And I was not getting from him what it is that I desired. And I was talking to some friends who also do this kind of work, and they pointed out that I was making this about myself, that my need for this person to express himself in a certain way was basically about Shai, not about him. And I was not, I had no experience with someone who has been in a system, a confined space for 50 years. And that is something that at the time I had no tools of how to deal with. And the best advice that I received from my friends in this field was, all you can do is provide him the space to explore how deep and how far he wants to go. And it was only towards the end of that course that I did that. And A, it was very freeing for me. And B, at the very last session we had, as we were going around about what we got out of this course, he opened up for the first time in those 8 weeks. And I think what I learned from that is that I am a middle-aged white man who has the experience of a middle-aged white man and am viewed and treated that way by others. And my ability to truly understand somebody from a different gender or race or age, I can understand it in theory, but in practice, I can't. And being able to recognize that and being able to be okay with it is what I'm striving for at the moment. And so I have classes where 90% of the students are from other countries other than the United States. And it's important for me to understand that their educational background, their surroundings have been different than mine. So whereby I was challenged to think outside the box and to be creative. Others come from a place where they were taught to repeat and to memorize. And that's a very different way of learning and being. And the great thing about doing this kind of work in a group and in a circle is that I'm not there to teach anyone anything. I'm there to provide a space for people to discover things about themselves, with me providing some guidance. But at the end of the day, what they get out of it and what they take from it and what they walk away from is entirely up to them. I just need to be aware that I don't have all the answers and I don't have all the experiences.
Thank you. Thank you for those reflections. I do want to leave time for some of the questions, and some of you have written to me directly to share your questions. So I will ask them on your behalf. One of the questions is, how do you assess sort of healing and conflict resolution in participants? Like, how do you determine, or do you determine that some healing has happened?
Oh, it's a good question, because at the end of the day, it's not about me determining that. That's about the person who's choosing to do the work to heal. If I'm teaching a full semester course, then that is let's say around 4 months. Some students would go through a process in which there's definitely a feeling of lightness for them, and to others it might only be the beginning. And so it is such a personal journey for each person, and I might not be in their lives by the time that they have gotten to a point in which they feel lighter. I also don't think that anybody fully heals. This is going to be my journey for the entire of my life, to work on my challenges and my traumas and my pain. I can only notice if somebody is working towards that, or if somebody is choosing to avoid it. And it is such a personal choice to work on healing or not.
Thank you. And the next question is somewhat related, which is the concept of an imagined apology sounds interesting. What do you do when the person who desperately needs to apologize refuses to apologize, or does not have the capacity to apologize? In other words, I think the question is, do you push them to a place of apology, or do you simply have to wait until they're ready?
There is a quote that I use in my class that life becomes easier when we learn to accept an apology we never received. which is something I try to abide by, but I'm still struggling with that. But I'm going to so I would never force someone to apologize to me, because an apology is an acknowledgement of pain that was done. And also there are various types of apologies as well. There's remorse, and there's regret, and there is empathy, and there's social harmony, and each one comes from a slightly different angle. I think when people think of apology, of receiving an apology, they want to receive a remorse apology, which is where the person is acknowledging that they did something wrong, and that they're taking responsibility, and that they've caused harm. It's often also the apology that many people find most difficult to give to someone else. So whether or not somebody else apologizes to me, that's entirely up to them. It's what I choose to do internally. And so when we're talking about letters of apology, I don't see them personally, I don't see them as imaginary apologies. And I'll give an example of what I did last semester in my class. So when my students write a letter of apology, I do the same thing as well. And I also share that in class. And I chose to write a letter of apology from the person who fired me, because at the time when it happened, I felt anger, I felt shame, I felt fear, I felt that I was not seen, that I was not acknowledged. All those needs were present for about a year. And that person lived rent-free in my head for that entire time. And so, I decided to have this type of assignment, and I thought, okay, I can't expect my students to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So I decided to write a letter of apology from the person who fired me. And in that letter, this person acknowledged all the pain that I experienced, acknowledged all the actions that were taken that were wrong, in my opinion. They sought to provide me some type of reparation, not financial, but other type of reparation. So they went through all the steps of what a remorse apology would look like. And me writing that down on paper and then reading it out and receiving not feedback, but questions, and what resonated with people was a hugely healing experience for me. So while I did not receive the apology from this person that I so desired, at the end of the day, my goal was to be healed. And that's what actually helped that. And here's the irony, was that 2 weeks after I wrote that letter and read it out, I had a meeting with that person to talk about something else. And I walked into that meeting not feeling like a victim. And so that letter of apology, even though it was not written by that person and never provided by that person, still had the exact same outcome that I was needing. And I took control of that process.
That's great. Thank you so much for that answer. Cassandra asks, do you offer anything in your circles that increases confidence? I work with groups of women and love to hear your wisdom on how to guide them in deepening their self-confidence.
So I think based on, so I would say the majority of my students are female on the 2 campuses that I teach. And the issue of confidence is similar to many, both male and female. I think a lot of the students that I have, there's a feeling of loneliness. There's a feeling that I'm the only one experiencing what it is that I'm going through right now. There's a feeling that no one understands me. And what builds the confidence within the group is hearing other people tell their personal stories and realizing, holy crap, I'm not the only one. And I think that at the end of the day is having a space where I can tell my story and not be judged, and have other people tell their story and not be judged, is what at the end of the day I believe builds confidence in oneself, and all because you are now part of a community. And I know for me personally that the times when I was the most insecure, the most afraid, was when I felt that nobody else was like me.
Thank you, Shai. I have 3 other questions. And I want to also thank those of you who have offered comment and suggestion in the chat for your comments and suggestions. This question is from Raju. Do you feel the identity of the United States has changed from being an international peacekeeping diplomatic moral leader? And if so, how are you affected in your inner framework and as a peacekeeper living in the United States?
So I'm an immigrant to the U.S. I came in 2006. I worked on Capitol Hill. And I now have been working in this field for some time. And, if somebody asked me, well, what do Israelis or what do Palestinians believe? I would say, well, depending who you ask and depending which person you're asking. And so when I view the United States, I can't view it as one specific entity. It's made of many parts. And I think one of the reasons, and I'm not trying to escape the answer, what I've chosen to do is to focus on the individual level rather than the macro, because I have not, I think one of the reasons why I've moved to working on internal and interpersonal conflict management is because for so long I thought, oh, if I only was able to work for the US government, I could make this humongous difference. And I personally was not able to. And I think there are a lot of initiatives and a lot of organizations. And as an example, one of my contracts is with the U.S. Institute of Peace, which is funded by Congress, although it's not a government entity. And they do peace building work around the world, including curriculum development and training, which is what I'm part of. And so the fact that they exist, the fact that they are seen as some sort of representative of the U.S., I think is very positive. Of course, there's all the other parts of funding, weapons and governments that I might less agree with. But it's hard for me to talk about the macro because it's not really my world anymore. I think it used to be, and I've chosen to focus on the communities that I either am part of building or the ones that I currently live in.
And you're watering the good in that way. Speaking of the United States Institute of Peace, since I'm also involved, I would love for you folks to check out their academy. They have many online courses that are free and available to you. They also have resources for middle and high school teachers that are free and available to you. I have been privileged to work with them in the Generations Change program, working with young leaders in conflict spaces in their 20s, and also work with them for the Women Building Peace Award. So do check out some of the wonderful offerings that are available to all. Okay, so 2 more questions, and we're going to be closing at about 10:15 today, Hawaii time, mindful of the fact that not all of you are in Hawaii. From Kailani, the question is, when there is great challenge or conflict that arises and emotions are raw and angry, how do you manage or diffuse those emotions?
So I think it's really important to be aware of your or their cortisol levels. So that's your stress levels. And I am a huge believer in taking a break. You know, the saying "never go to bed angry" doesn't always really resonate with me, because maybe having a night to sleep on it might be a good thing. And so, but what I work on with my students, and so we practice high quality listening. We practice affect labeling, and affect with an A. And affect labeling is naming the emotion that someone is experiencing. Because when somebody is angry or emotional in any way, the number one thing that they might be needing is to have those emotions acknowledged. Simply by stating what it is that they're feeling is a way to be seen and acknowledged and appreciated. And so one of the techniques is when engaging with somebody who is upset, is to do that. At the same time, if you are the target of that, or if you're the one feeling it, I am a huge believer in taking time to simply calm down. Because when I'm upset, I'm not actually listening to the other person. The part about affect labeling is that you want the other person who is upset to see that you see their pain. And if somebody is in pain and you are asking them a logical question, so somebody's telling you, oh, this person just yelled at me and I'm so pissed off. And if your question is, well, why did they yell at you? You're now taking them from a place of emotion in their heart to a place in their head where they have to think of a logical answer, rather than being on their journey, which is, no, they're right now upset and they're on an emotional path, and continue with them on that path rather than moving them away from their emotions. I know for me at least, for a very long time, I was very uncomfortable with other people's strong emotions. And I just wanted them to stop. Just stop being upset, stop being angry, stop crying, because it's making me feel uncomfortable. And what I realized, that I was really making it about myself, not about them. And I'm now in a place where I'm much more comfortable when somebody is upset or somebody is angry, because this is right now their journey. And my job as a human being, regardless of what my role or job is, my job as a human being is to be on their journey with them, so they can come out of it in a much better way.
Thank you. And being able to sit with the discomfort of those emotions is something that takes some practice, but I think is useful for all. So thank you for those reflections. Jill asked, Shai, do you offer anything in your circles? Oh, this is another question of confidence. So it's sort of been address, but perhaps I'll shift it a little bit to just, Jill speaks about sort of divine feminine energy and looking at healing and empowering modalities for women. You sort of answered that question earlier a little bit, but do you have anything else to add to that quest?
Can you paraphrase the question for me?
Yeah, I guess the question is not a question. I think this is in response to the previous question, Jill. I'm apologizing. I'm just recognizing now that Jill is actually sharing workshops about channeling divine energy and the kind of healing that empowers women and such. So thank you, Jill, for that suggestion. My apologies for misreading that initially. I wanted to then land on this final question, which is from Iro. I wanted basically the question is the genocide researcher Erwin Staub, in his work with perpetrators of violence in Indonesia and Rwanda, found that almost no one takes responsibility or expresses regret. How does one start to break down such barriers? I think, if I'm to paraphrase that a little bit, the question is really about, what do you do to enable people to be open to the kind of vulnerability that is needed for true forgiveness and apology? Is there a process that is helpful?
I think so. What I try to do in my class, in my workshops, is to listen to somebody else's story in a way that I don't need to agree or disagree with their story or their experience. I am simply going on their journey. And the more I listen to someone else, I'm not only learning about them, I'm teaching them about me by listening to them. And that allows for the person who is speaking to start seeing you, the listener, in a different way. And so when it comes to violence, when it comes to whether physical or emotional, simply being able to listen to somebody else's pain, because at the end of the day, most people who are in a place of conflict see themselves as the victim, and trying to convince someone that they're not a victim usually, from my experience, does not work. And so I want to be able to acknowledge the fact that they view themselves as a victim, and that is okay. By doing that, by seeing their pain, by acknowledging it and going on their journey, I'm providing them an opening to explore my journey as well, if they choose to go on it. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. That was just my answer.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Raju, for putting the Matsunaga document that we created linked there. Thank you, so many of you, for your insights and comments. And I really hope that many of you begin to consider the ways that you can apply your skills, your talents, your energies towards conflict management. informalized courses to pursue and be curious, but also out in the community. Shai, thank you for inspiring us to consider particularly the importance of deep listening and cultivating the empathetic and and humble capacity to do so. I think is so important right now, and something that is too seldom seen and practiced.
Thank you
Grateful
for having
you.
me.
Once again, mahalo to Wiwik and Jose, and the recording will be provided for you, if those of you wish to revisit some of these thoughts. And we really look forward to seeing you at our next Careers in Peacebuilding event. And be well, all.